I never thought the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally would be the ones to quietly push me out of my own family. But that's exactly what happened last month. My name is Heather. I'm 32 years old, and I will never forget the night my phone lit up with a group message that changed everything. It was from my parents. Just 12 words. "We think it's best you step away for now." That was it. Cold. Final. And as if that wasn't enough, my aunt, the same woman who never worked a day in the business but collected the same profits I did after grinding 60-hour weeks, reacted with a thumbs up emoji, a digital nod of agreement. Like my erasure was something worth casually approving. I remember staring at that message for what felt like an eternity. At first I thought maybe it was a joke, some poor attempt at family sarcasm. But no. The silence that followed told me all I needed to know. And in that silence, something inside me snapped. Or maybe it finally woke up. I typed back one simple reply. Understood. I'll respect that, and step away from the family fund too. I hit send, closed the banking app that held my contribution, and in that moment my life's trajectory shifted forever. By sunrise I had 89 missed calls. My father's voice filled my voicemail inbox, moving from anger to panic as the hours ticked by. He said the bank had flagged everything. He said I needed to call him immediately. But I didn't. I just whispered to myself, "I'm honoring your decision." After years of being undervalued, overlooked, dismissed, and treated like a child, despite proving myself over and over again, I finally realized I had the power to walk away. To understand why that single message hit me so hard, you need to know where I come from. My family wasn't just any family in Boston. We were the Millers, a name that carried weight in financial circles across New England. Miller Financial Advisors had been operating for 3 generations, starting with my grandfather, who built it from nothing after the war. I grew up surrounded by wealth, 5-bedroom colonial house, imported furniture, photos of my parents smiling alongside governors, senators, even celebrities. My mother was the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties where deals worth millions were sealed over her apple pie. And me, I was the little girl with her nose in stock reports, while my cousins played with dolls. I remember asking my dad questions about market trends when I was only 10. Sometimes he didn't even know the answer, but instead of pride, he looked at me with something else: discomfort. That same discomfort followed me all the way into adulthood. Even after graduating top of my class from Wharton with a double major in finance and economics, they still treated me like a child. When I joined Miller Financial at 24, my father didn't trust me to stand on my own. He placed me under my cousin Jake, a man who had barely scraped by in college, but had the one thing I didn't: he was a son. "Jake's been here longer," my father told me, patting my shoulder like I was a trainee. Jake had been there 7 months longer. 7 months, that was my welcome. That was my... For 8 years, I poured myself into that business. My strategies outperformed the market year after year. Clients requested me by name. The division I managed brought in over 60% of the company's profits in a single quarter. But the credit, it always floated upward, claimed by my father, or reshaped into Jake's relationship skills. At family meetings, I presented detailed analysis, only to hear my uncles scoff. "That's all very technical. What does your father think?" My mother would pull me aside afterward with her soft smile and cutting words. "Honey, men don't like women who sound too smart. Let them feel important." And then there was my Aunt Patricia, the same aunt who reacted with that thumbs up to my banishment. She never missed a chance to steal my ideas. I once laid out a detailed European expansion strategy, only for her to bring it up 3 weeks later as if she had dreamed it up herself. And everyone applauded her. It was exhausting, humiliating, and relentless. But still I stayed. I kept believing that eventually my loyalty would be seen, that one day they'd finally recognize my worth. By my 32nd birthday, I had already built something they couldn't see: a secret safety net. While they vacationed in the Hamptons and paraded around in luxury cars, I invested in startups, bought stakes in emerging tech companies, and developed financial algorithms in the quiet of my weekends. My hidden portfolio had grown to $17 million. Quietly, independently, mine. But I never flaunted it. I still drove a modest car, still showed up every day to grind for people who dismissed me. Some people might call it patience. Some might call it fear. Whatever it was, it kept me tethered to a family that never saw me as an equal. Until the moment they pushed me out with a group text and a thumbs up emoji. That was the night I decided I would no longer beg for respect. That was the night I chose myself. I remember that weekend so vividly, like it's seared into my bones. The night after the group message, after I pulled my contribution from the family fund, I sat in the quiet of my brownstone, staring out at the Boston skyline. The city lights blinked at me alive and indifferent, while my phone buzzed on the table like a wasp I refused to swat. Dozens of missed calls, messages piling up, each one more frantic than the last. For once in my life, I didn't rush to explain, didn't scramble to soothe bruised egos, didn't minimize myself to keep the peace. Instead, I brewed tea, turned on a movie I had been putting off for months, and let my family unravel without me. At exactly 10:47 p.m., my father called. His ringtone, one I'd always picked up without hesitation, filled the room. But this time I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. By the fourth call, I switched my phone off completely and climbed into bed. And the strange thing, I slept better that night than I had in years. When I powered my phone back on the next morning, it nearly choked on the flood of notifications. 64 missed calls, 127 texts, 43 WhatsApp messages, and 17 voicemails. I made coffee before daring to listen to a single one. The first voicemail was pure outrage. "Heather, this is your father. Call me back immediately. There must be some mistake." The second carried an edge of fury. "This is unacceptable. Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way." But as the hours passed, their tone shifted. By 2:15 a.m., my father's voice was stripped bare of authority. He sounded frightened. "Heather, what happened? The bank has flagged everything. The fund is frozen. I don't understand. Please call me back." Please call. By morning, desperation had replaced anger. "Heather, I don't know what's happening. Whatever we did, please, the bank says they need your verification. Please call me." My father, the man who had dismissed me as inexperienced, who had undermined my judgment, who had smiled as others stole my credit, was begging me. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Not the kind that struts or shouts, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from finally knowing you don't need anyone's permission to exist. I typed a single text: "I'm honoring your decision. You asked me to step away, and I have. I've withdrawn my personal contribution as allowed under Section 7.3 of the Family Agreement. The bank freeze will resolve once their verification is complete. I've already submitted documentation." Almost immediately, my phone rang again. I declined the call. Then I sent one final message: "I'll be available to discuss this on Monday at 9 a.m. at my home office. The address has been emailed." After that, silence. Not on their end, my phone kept rattling with alerts I ignored, but inside me, for the first time, I felt calm. But beneath that calm was a river of memory. I couldn't stop replaying every slight, every dismissal that had led me here. The way Jake, my cousin, walked into meetings late with nothing but a coffee cup and was treated like a rising star. The way my Uncle Richard cut me off mid-presentation with a condescending, "That's all very technical, Heather," as if precision were a flaw. The way my Aunt Patricia smiled sweetly while twisting my ideas into her own. And worst of all, the way my father sat silent while it all happened, sometimes even encouraging it. I thought about the client meeting where I'd implemented a new strategy that delivered a 14% return in one quarter, only to be scolded for acting without authorization. I thought about overhearing Patricia and Richard laughing in the break room about how my charts and big words were giving them headaches. I thought about the meeting they held without me in my own office, using my own slides to court my clients, smiling like conquering heroes. each memory cut deeper like tiny betrayals stacked into a mountain. By Saturday afternoon, the family's panic had spilled into public view. Clients began calling me directly after my father, in his desperation, gave out my personal number. He had crossed a line, dragging outsiders into our internal implosion. I spent hours reassuring them, explaining that their accounts were untouched, that the chaos was confined to the family fund. Not once did I betray professionalism, even though my family had betrayed me 100 times over. That evening, I got a message from the only cousin who had ever really seen me, Amanda. "Good for you," she wrote. "They never appreciated what you brought to the table. Want to get coffee next week?" For the first time in 2 days, I smiled. But not everyone approached me with kindness. Uncle Richard accused me of sabotage. Jake whined about a deal they were counting on. Aunt Patricia, the same woman who voted me out with a thumb emoji, suddenly remembered her admiration for my business acumen. Even my mother, who rarely took sides, left a tearful voicemail about family loyalty, invoking my grandfather's legacy like a ghost meant to guilt me back into line. By Sunday night, the shift was unmistakable. Outrage had withered into desperation. They understood now. Without my contribution, without my strategies, without my quiet, relentless work, they were standing on shaky ground. And when my father showed up at my door, shirt-wrinkled, eyes hollow, begging me to save a multi-million-dollar deal, I realized just how much they needed me. But this time, the terms would be mine. At 8:30 on Monday morning, my security system chimed. They had come early, like soldiers gathering before a battle they weren't certain they could win. I watched through the camera as my father stood at the front, flanked by Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, my cousin Jake, and Jonathan, the family attorney. Their faces told the whole story: Richard's rigid jaw, Patricia's forced smile, Jake's smugness laced with panic. My father looked older than I had ever seen him. When I opened the door at 8:59, I didn't greet them as a daughter or niece. I greeted them as the woman they had underestimated for years. "Come in," I said simply, stepping aside. They filed into my brownstone, their eyes darting across the original paintings, the polished wood floors, the evidence of a life they had never imagined I had built without them. I led them into the dining room, where I had prepared a professional setup, neatly stacked documents at each place, fresh coffee pastries arranged on a tray. A conference room, but on my terms. And at the head of the table, a spot my father always occupied, I remained standing. He noticed. They all noticed. And none of them said a word. "We're here to resolve this situation quickly." My father began, his voice firm, but cracked at the edges. "The Henderson deal." I raised my hand, a gesture he had used on me countless times to silence my protests. "Before we discuss any specific deals, we need to address the larger situation," I said evenly. "I've withdrawn my contribution from the family fund. The bank has confirmed the transaction is proper. The freeze will lift once their procedures are complete." Richard exploded. "This is ridiculous. You're holding the family hostage because your feelings got hurt." I turned to him, calm but burning inside. "This isn't about feelings, Uncle Richard. It's about respect. For 8 years, I generated the majority of the firm's profits. My clients specifically sought me out, yet I was removed from my role in a group text based on feedback that doesn't exist. That's not leadership, that's erasure." Patricia leaned forward with her syrupy voice. "Honey, it was just miscommunication. We would have discussed everything at the retreat." "The retreat I wasn't invited to," I asked, watching her falter. Silence stretched until Jake laughed under his breath. "Let's be real, Heather. You need us. You need the Miller name, the connections. Where do you think you're going to go?" That was the moment I had been waiting for. I pressed a button on the remote, and the large TV behind me flickered on. A sleek logo appeared: Heather Miller, Capital Management. Gasps rippled around the table. I advanced the slides, revealing performance charts, my firm's average returns of 17%, nearly double what Miller Financial had managed. Then came the patents, 7 of them all in my name. Finally, the client list: 27 high-net-worth individuals managing over $400 million in assets, all separate from the family business. My father's face drained of color. "When would you have had time?" "Evenings, weekends." "The vacations I never took," I interrupted. "While you were at the lake house or in Europe, I was building something real." Richard sputtered. This is a violation. I slid a contract across the table to Jonathan. Read the clause. It allows for personal investment activities as long as I don't solicit Miller clients. Every step has been documented. Every strategy was developed on my own time. Legally, it's airtight. Jonathan glanced up after scanning the document. She's correct. I turned the final slide, a stark comparison between Miller Financial's stagnant growth and the soaring trajectory of my firm. I didn't build this to hurt anyone, I said quietly. I built it because I knew I'd never be respected here. This wasn't sabotage, it was survival. The room was suffocating in its silence. Even Jake, usually quick with smug comments, sat slack-jawed. Finally, my father spoke voice raw. What do you want, Heather? I met his eyes. 3 things. First, the Henderson deal gets its funding today, but as a loan from me at market interest with repayment terms. Second, I take a 1-month leave from Miller Financial, while you consider whether you actually want me as part of this family business. Third, when we meet again in 30 days, either I return under new terms or I walk away with my clients. Jonathan nodded slowly. It's reasonable given the circumstances. My father's jaw tightened. Pride waged war with pragmatism in his eyes. Finally, he exhaled. Fine, we accept. I signed the loan documents that morning. The Henderson deal was saved. But as the family filed out of my home, their faces pale with shock, I knew the power dynamic had shifted forever. When my father lingered at the door, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard. I underestimated you. I've been doing it your whole life, haven't I? Yes, I said simply. He nodded, eyes heavy with regret. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I wanted those words years ago. Not now, not after I had forced them from his lips. But still they landed like a stone dropped in water, rippling out in ways I couldn't yet understand. For the first time, I wasn't the little girl begging for approval. I was the woman who set the terms. 30 days passed faster than I expected. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't dragging myself to the family's mahogany-paneled conference room, bracing for dismissals or backhanded compliments. Instead, I poured myself into my own firm, strengthening my systems, preparing for whichever outcome lay ahead. If the family wanted me back, I'd return only on my terms. If they didn't, I was ready to walk away with my clients and never look back. Those weeks felt like breathing fresh air after years of suffocation. I hiked the White Mountains, met friends for dinners, even allowed myself to date again, things I had denied myself while chained to Miller Financial. And in those quiet moments, I realized how much of myself I had sacrificed to people who would never truly see me. Amanda and I grew closer. Over coffee one afternoon, she confessed she had always dreamed of being an architect, but had been shoved into the marketing department to be useful to the business. Watching you stand up to them gave me courage, she admitted, eyes shining. I've started interviewing with design firms. I squeezed her hand. They'll try to stop you, I warned. She smiled. Let them try. Meanwhile, Jonathan, the attorney, sent updates. The loan had saved the Henderson deal, which was now progressing smoothly. Some of my investment strategies had been quietly adopted during my absence with excellent results. My father had stopped pretending they were bad ideas once he needed them. And the whispers from Jonathan were clear. The family was shifting. They were scared of losing me for good. When the day of the meeting arrived, I chose the battlefield. Not their office, not my home. A neutral space, a private room in an upscale Boston restaurant with a round table instead of a rectangular one. No head, no throne for my father. Only equals. They arrived together, just like before my father. Richard, Patricia, Jake, Jonathan. But this time my mother was with them, her face softer than I'd seen in years. And Amanda came too, shoulders squared with quiet defiance. Already the dynamic was different. My father began, his voice subdued but steady. Heather, over the past month we've had time to reflect. We failed to recognize your value and we want to correct that. We're proposing a restructuring. Jonathan distributed folders around the table. Inside was something I hadn't expected: Miller Capital Management, a new division under the family umbrella with me as president and CEO. Full autonomy over strategies, profit sharing separate from the traditional pool. And the detail that made me stop breathing for a moment: proportional voting rights in the family fund, based on contributions rather than equal shares for everyone. Finally, no more free rides for those who gave nothing. What about my independent firm? I asked cautiously. Jonathan cleared his throat. We're proposing a merger. Your clients, your patents, your intellectual property, all fully protected with you maintaining service rights. Everything remains legally yours but integrated into the new division. For once, I didn't feel like I was negotiating with sharks. I felt like I was being courted. My Uncle Richard, the man who had sneered at my complicated charts, leaned forward. I resisted change because I thought tradition kept us strong. But I was wrong. Your results speak for themselves. Patricia, who had once celebrated my exclusion with a thumbs-up emoji, admitted, "We need your perspective, Heather. The business can't grow if we don't evolve." Even Jake, shifting uncomfortably in his chair, mumbled, "I didn't realize how deep your strategies went until I reviewed them. You're better at this than I gave you credit for." It was half-hearted, but hearing those words from him felt like lightning splitting the sky. And then my mother did something I never expected. She reached across the table, took my hand and squeezed. No speeches, no manipulation, just quiet support. I wanted to be cold. I wanted to say they were too late. But part of me softened, not for their sakes, but for mine. I had finally forced them to see what I had always known: I was worth more than the scraps of respect they offered me. "I'll need time to review the details," I said calmly. "Of course," my father replied. His voice carried something I had never heard from him before: humility. I spent the next week combing through the proposal with my team and an independent lawyer. Every clause, every number, every loophole was dissected until I was certain I would never again be cornered by oversights or family tricks. The final agreement was solid. I accepted, but not without modifications that safeguarded my autonomy and ensured proportional power within the fund. The day we signed the papers, something inside me shifted. For years I had begged to be acknowledged. Now they were the ones bending to keep me. My independent firm merged seamlessly into Miller Capital Management, and within months, my division outperformed every other branch. Clients were drawn to our innovative strategies. Our reputation grew beyond New England, reaching investors who had once scoffed at us. For the first time, I wasn't the hidden engine behind success, I was its face. The family dynamic, however, wasn't instantly healed. Old habits clung like shadows. My father still occasionally tried to override decisions. Richard still muttered about tradition. Patricia still threw her barbed compliments, and Jake still looked for ways to take shortcuts. But the structures I had built held firm. My voice now carried weight, backed not by sentiment, but by contracts, numbers, and undeniable results. Amanda, true to her word, left Miller Financial to chase her dream of architecture. I invested in her new design firm not just because I believed in her talent, but because I wanted to prove to both of us that we could step outside the family's grip and thrive. Watching her blossom reminded me that this battle wasn't only mine. Every woman in our family had been told to shrink, to soften, to make space for the men. Amanda and I were rewriting that script together. One evening, almost a year after the group message that started everything, my father and I sat side by side in the office reviewing quarterly results. The numbers were spectacular. For once, silence stretched between us, not from tension, but from reflection. Finally, he spoke. "When your grandfather passed the business to me, he told me something I never understood until now. He said, 'The best legacy isn't preservation, it's evolution.' I think I finally get it." I looked at him, at the lines that had deepened in his face over the past year. "Evolution is harder than preservation," I said softly. "Preservation feels safe, but it traps you in the past." He nodded slowly. "And pride blinds you to the ones who are carrying you forward." He paused, then met my eyes. "I should have seen you for who you were years ago. Not as my daughter, not as the girl I needed to protect, but as the leader you already were." His words landed differently this time. They didn't feel forced. They felt earned. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe him. The journey from being undervalued to being respected had cost me years of pain, countless tears behind closed doors, and a confrontation that nearly tore everything apart. But the outcome was undeniable, the business was stronger, my voice was no longer ignored, and I had built a life that was truly mine. And here's the lesson I want you to take from my story. Respect isn't something you can wait for others to hand you. It isn't given because of your title, your family name, or your loyalty. Respect must sometimes be claimed. And worth is not determined by how loudly others recognize it, but by how firmly you know it in yourself. So if you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or told to shrink, remember this: your value doesn't diminish because someone else refuses to see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to honor your own worth, even if it means walking away from those who never will. Have you ever had to stand your ground to finally be seen? Share your story with me in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories of finding your voice, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that their worth is not negotiable. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the bravest act is simply refusing to be invisible.